November 4th, 2006. Millions across Europe lost power simultaneously. Not from war, not from a cyber attack, but from a routine maintenance operation in Germany. A cruise ship needed to pass beneath a power line. So German operators did what they'd done hundreds of times before. They switched off a high-voltage line for exactly 66 minutes. What happened next cost 3.6 billion euros and exposed a terrifying truth about how Europe's interconnected power grid turns small mistakes into continental disasters that empty your wallet. This wasn't the first time. It won't be the last. And the shocking part? The same vulnerabilities that caused this blackout are amplifying right now, threatening your energy bills in ways regulators don't want you to understand. That November evening started ordinary. E.ON, Germany's largest utility, scheduled the line shutdown to let Norwegian cruise lines Norwegian Pearl sail down the Ems River. Standard procedure. Happens constantly across Europe's grid. But at 10:10 p.m., the cascade began. The moment that line went offline, power imbalance rippled across borders at the speed of electricity. The UCTE network, connecting 24 countries from Portugal to Poland, split into 3 separate zones. 15 million households went dark simultaneously across Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Austria, and Belgium. Trains froze mid-journey. Elevators trapped passengers between floors. Airport systems crashed. Banking networks flickered offline. In Paris, the metro ground to a halt, stranding thousands underground. Italian cities went black. Spanish traffic systems failed. The blackout respected no borders. A German maintenance decision became a French emergency. An Italian crisis, a Spanish catastrophe. Here's what makes this economically devastating. E.ON's grid was in good condition and constantly maintained, according to Klaus-Dieter Maubach, their executive. The company wasn't negligent. They followed standard protocols. Yet they immediately announced $3.6 billion in network upgrades anyway. Why? Because the technical investigation revealed something terrifying about Europe's entire system design. The failure violated what engineers call the N1 criterion, the fundamental rule that no single component failure should overload the system. One line going offline shouldn't matter. That's the whole point of redundancy. But Europe's interconnected market had created invisible dependencies that regulators didn't fully understand. Power flows across borders constantly, following price signals and demand. When that German line switched off, the entire continental network couldn't absorb the redistribution. The system tried to rebalance automatically. It couldn't. Frequency began dropping. Protective systems kicked in across 8 countries simultaneously, splitting the network to prevent total collapse. That split saved Europe from a complete blackout, but it also proved the continent was running one failure away from darkness. EU Energy Commissioner Andris Piebalgs stated the economic stakes bluntly. Events in one part of Europe impact on other parts. Italian Prime Minister Romano Prodi demanded better coordination and investment. The blackout became a political crisis because it exposed an expensive truth. Europe's market integration had created systemic vulnerabilities that would cost billions to fix. But did those fixes actually work? After 2006, Europe invested heavily. ENTSO-E, the network of transmission operators, implemented the European Awareness System, a real-time platform letting operators share data instantly. They strengthened the N1 standards. They coordinated emergency protocols. Politicians declared blackouts unacceptable. Then came 2025. The Iberian Peninsula blackout hit during Europe's aggressive decarbonization push. Lisbon, Madrid, and Toulouse experienced full or partial blackouts. Hospitals switched to backup generators. Airports halted operations. Trains stopped. Banking systems stuttered offline again. But the economic hit was different this time. Portugal's grid operators made an immediate decision: suspend all electricity imports from Spain. Not because of technical necessity, because of price protection. The moment Spanish power stopped flowing across the border, Portuguese electricity prices surged. Households saw bills spike. Businesses faced immediate cost increases. The blackout lasted hours. The price impact lasted weeks. This revealed the hidden economic trap of interconnection. When grids link across borders, failures don't just spread geographically, they spread financially. One country's technical problem becomes another country's price crisis. The market integration that keeps costs low during normal operations amplifies economic shocks during failures. Investigators found regulatory gaps and magnified cross-border vulnerabilities. Translation? Nearly 2 decades after 2006, the same fundamental weaknesses remained. The expensive reforms had created better emergency responses, but hadn't eliminated the underlying structural flaws that turn local issues into continental economic disasters. And honestly, the frequency of these disasters was about to get shocking. Here's what regulators weren't publicly emphasizing. Interconnection creates a financial domino effect. When Portuguese operators suspended Spanish imports, they weren't just protecting their grid stability. They were preventing Spanish price volatility from crashing into Portuguese markets. But that protection came at a cost: immediate price surges for Portuguese consumers who suddenly lost access to cheaper Spanish power. The market design treats electricity like any commodity, flowing toward higher prices, seeking equilibrium. During normal operations, this efficiency keeps costs relatively low. During crises, it becomes a transmission mechanism for economic pain. The 2025 blackout proved that post-2006 reforms had focused on preventing physical grid collapse while ignoring the economic collapse that failures trigger. Europe had built better emergency brakes, but was driving faster toward the cliff. Forget rare blackouts. The real story is happening right now, every single day. European grid operators used to declare approximately 15 emergency operations per year. That number has exploded to 240. Not 15 emergencies annually anymore, 240. That's nearly one crisis every 36 hours. Europe's grid has shifted from stable system to constant firefighting. Look at what nearly happened recently. The continental grid separated unexpectedly into northwest and southeast zones. Frequency dropped by 0.1 Hz, a seemingly small number that represents massive instability. Stefan Zak, spokesman for EVN, explained the stakes. Sensitive machines have already felt the frequency drop. If the fluctuations are too high, machines switch themselves off to protect themselves. When machines shut down to protect themselves, power plants go offline. When power plants go offline, frequency drops further. This creates a death spiral toward total blackout. Only quick action by transmission operators, combined with interruptible services in France and Italy, prevented collapse. Michael Strebel, managing director of Wien Energy, summarized the economic impossibility. Such firefighting operations are not a viable long-term business model. But why is this happening? Most people blame renewables. Wind and solar create volatility, the argument goes. When the wind stops or clouds appear, the grid becomes unstable. That's partially true, but dangerously incomplete. Renewables do contribute to instability through intermittency, and the transition away from fossil fuels has reduced the number of backup plants operators can quickly activate. But the 2006 blackout, the one that started this entire crisis, had nothing to do with renewables. It was a procedural failure during a routine operation. The real issue is this. Europe designed a market for stable, predictable baseload power. Coal plants, nuclear reactors, gas turbines. They produce steady output that operators can plan around. Renewables require a completely different market design with faster response times, distributed generation management, and sophisticated demand balancing. Europe is trying to run a Formula One race car with horse and buggy infrastructure. The 240 annual emergencies aren't just technical glitches. Each one costs money. Operators pay premium prices for interruptible services. They activate expensive peaker plants. They implement emergency protocols that require overtime staffing. These costs flow directly into your electricity bill as grid management fees. And the frequency of emergencies is increasing because the gap between system design and system reality keeps widening. So what exactly is Europe doing about this? Let's talk about their solutions and why they're not solving anything. The European Awareness System sounds impressive. It's a real-time information platform letting transmission operators across the continent share operational data instantly. When frequency drops in Romania, operators in France know immediately. They can coordinate responses, activate reserves, implement emergency protocols. This tool prevented the recent near blackout from becoming total collapse. That matters. But here's what the EAS doesn't do. It doesn't prevent the emergencies from happening in the first place. It's a sophisticated alarm system attached to a fundamentally vulnerable structure. Operators can respond faster, but they're still responding constantly. The N1 criterion, that rule about no single failure causing system overload, has been strengthened since 2006. Standards are stricter, compliance is monitored. Operators face penalties for violations, yet violations keep happening. Why? Because the N1 criterion was designed for a different grid. When power flows were predictable and unidirectional, large plants sending electricity to consumers, operators could calculate redundancy requirements. Add enough backup capacity, ensure no single failure breaks the system. Problem solved. Modern grids have power flowing in multiple directions simultaneously. Rooftop solar feeds back into distribution networks. Wind farms inject power at transmission level. Electric vehicle charging creates unpredictable demand spikes. The math behind N1 becomes exponentially more complex. The interruptible services that stabilized the recent near blackout represent another expensive band-aid. France and Italy pay large industrial customers to shut down instantly during emergencies. Aluminum smelters, chemical plants, industrial refrigeration, they receive compensation for maintaining the ability to disconnect within seconds. This works. It prevents blackouts, but it's hideously expensive. Those industrial customers don't shut down for free. They charge premium rates for providing this service. And the more frequently operators activate these contracts, remember, we're at 240 emergencies per year now, the higher the costs become. Every emergency response adds another line item to electricity bills. Romano Prodi was right when he called for better coordination and investment after 2006. Europe has achieved better coordination. The investment is where things fall apart. Not because money isn't being spent, billions flow into grid upgrades constantly, but because the investments are reactive rather than proactive. Operators patch the most recent failure point. They add redundancy where the last blackout occurred. They strengthen connections that broke during the latest emergency. It's sophisticated whack-a-mole, addressing symptoms while the disease metastasizes. The economic limitation is fundamental. These tools prevent catastrophic collapse, but don't eliminate the underlying stress, creating constant near collapses. As of right now, February 15, 2026, Europe's grid situation remains unresolved. Investigations into recent separations continue. ENTSO-E is developing new mandates for transmission operators. Politicians promise comprehensive reforms. Again, but the trajectory is clear and expensive. Short term, over the next 2 years, price volatility will intensify. As countries push harder toward decarbonization targets, import dependencies increase. When imports get suspended during emergencies, like Portugal cutting off Spanish power, prices spike immediately. Your electricity bill reflects these spikes through variable rates and grid management fees. Medium term, through 2030, those 240 annual emergencies aren't going anywhere. Unless backup generation capacity returns to the grid, which contradicts climate goals, operators will continue fighting daily fires. The debate about interconnection benefits versus risks will intensify as countries calculate whether staying connected to neighbors is worth the contagion risk during failures. Long-term, beyond 2030, the economic calculation becomes stark. Full grid upgrades to handle renewable integration will cost hundreds of billions across the continent. But the cost of inaction, continued price volatility, frequent blackouts, economic disruption, exceeds the investment cost. The expert consensus is surprisingly unified. Post-2006 reforms helped, but remain incomplete. Renewable integration increases the frequency of near misses. Current market designs can't handle the transition. For our Polish, American, and UK audiences, this matters directly. Poland faces particular vulnerability as a country still heavily dependent on coal, but committed to transition. The UK's island grid provides some isolation, but Brexit complicated coordination with continental operators. American viewers watching Europe's struggles are seeing a preview. The same renewable integration challenges will hit the US grid as solar and wind penetration increases. Every technical decision about Europe's grid is fundamentally an economic decision about who pays, how much, and when. The shocking truth isn't that blackouts happen. It's that the market structure guarantees they'll keep happening while spreading financial pain across borders faster than electricity itself flows. The 3.6 billion euros that E.ON invested after 2006 didn't solve the problem. It bought time. That time is running out. Understanding these economics matters because they determine energy security for millions. They influence trade relationships, industrial competitiveness, and household budgets. The vulnerabilities exposed in 2006 aren't historical curiosities. They're active threats multiplying every year as the grid transitions toward renewables without the structural reforms necessary to handle that transition safely. Next week, we're breaking down how Poland's coal phase-out creates a hidden economic time bomb for Central Europe's grid stability. Subscribe so you don't miss it, because what happens in Poland won't stay in Poland, not when these grids are this interconnected.